wanted to be a teacher for as long as I could remember. However, it was nothing like I'd imagined. Not the grind of administrative work, marking and lesson planning amidst all other duties expected. The mountains of books and the endless paperwork pushed me to my limits. Was teaching not about the students I interact with and inspire? I wanted to call it quits. My initial love for this profession lay buried under the overwhelming chores of a teacher. Being given the most notorious class did not help. The students were boisterous and disinterested. They were more keen in everything besides studying. Fistfights, thefts, extortions, bullying, and gang clashes were routine happenings. Vulgarities were flung all over like confetti without a regard for my presence in class. A decision was made. I would resign. A colleague who learned of my decision discouraged me. She advised that I ought to give it a final shot. I still remember how she encouraged me to get to know my students first. Eventually, I relented and decided to give it one more try. That year, I took various approaches to understand my students, engage them, and see them for who they were. I thought deeply about how I could reach into their hearts and touch them from within, even if it was for a brief moment. How could I reach into them to understand where they are coming from? How could I seek to understand them, communicate with them, and bring them to my side, to fight against their ignorance and lack of purpose? Each day, I discarded my mask as a teacher. I became a person, not the teacher. I regarded them as my kids in order to connect with them. I learned from them and became their student. Gradually, they warmed up to me. I often brought chocolates into class to reward them for mastering their work. The first time I did, I saw a glint in the eyes of the 17-year-old who was moved by what I said and did. That sight tugged at my heartstrings. Perhaps all these kids needed was to know that their attempts at learning were worth rewarding. A friendship grew within the class, and I felt included as part of their community. The little successes that followed warmed us to one another. They began to open up to me and often shared their concerns and fears. I was beginning to reach out to them, which encouraged me greatly. Over time, I got to know them better, including the sadness and pains in some of their lives. I realized that their attempts to act tough were the only ways to cover up the inadequacies and insecurities. Ming was one such boy. He was constantly caught in fights and squabbles with schoolmates and teachers. I had great difficulty with this boy, whom I knew was wearing a tough mask but hurting inside. One day, Ming was involved in a fight outside school. This landed him into serious trouble, and he was severely punished by the school. When I told the class what had happened to Ming, the class cheered. I broke down. I told them that I could not go on as I had given them all that I had to give. The class, including Ming, saw me defeated and realized that they were the cause of it. For the rest of the day, they were silent throughout. The next day, something heartwarming happened. The class promised me that they would not let me down again. They would try their best in everything that they did. That year, I saw my kids achieving in their own fields, and I was extremely proud of them. Some years later, my kids paid me a visit. They had a box of beautifully wrapped chocolates for me. They handed me the box with that familiar twinkle in their eyes that spoke so much of the friendship between us. Ming said that it was the chocolates and my care and concern that made the difference in their lives. These students were the ones who showed me what teaching is all about. It was then that I really began to understand the African proverb, "I learn, therefore I teach." I began to read it also as, "I teach, therefore I learn." I now know that a teacher doesn't just teach, a teacher changes lives. I'm glad I didn't quit then.